Hey there, nation. Welcome to the show. We help you to play miniatures wargaming on a budget. It is I, Commander CheapSkate, and now it's time for another edition of Tales in the Underhive. This is Necromunda Battle Report number 24. It is a Hoard scenario that is fought between my two friends, Prince Belaire of the Iron Sights of this House Orlock gang, versus my other buddy, Sergeant Sigmary of the Sleeping Dogs of House Delaque. So that's why it's time for these two old rivals of the Underhive to battle it up for a whole crate of loot that's located right in the middle of the House Delaque territory. So without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, we'll run through these two army lists for both these gangs, and we'll go directly to the battle report. Alright folks, that takes directly to the scenario rules for this one. The battle report that we're fighting on is a battle called the Hoard. It's a Hoard scenario. Basically what ends up happening is you have two gangs. You have the Sleeping Dogs in this case being the defenders, as well as the Iron Sights being the attackers. What ends up happening is that you put a little loot icon in the middle of the table to represent the defending gang's Hoard, which is worth 3d6 times 5 credits for the opposing gang if they manage to capture it. The whole point of the scenario is that the attackers try to attack the defenders, take them out, take their loot, and try to retreat with it at the same time. Also, to make things complicated for the defenders, originally you only get d6 with the defenders that can watch over the Hoard, and basically what you do then is you take the rest of your army, the rest of your gang, divide them into smaller forces, and you roll off to see if the reinforcements arrive onto the board to help out to save your defenders or not. What ends up happening is on the very first round you must roll a 6. Afterwards you add 1 to the die roll you roll to get a total of 6 after that. So for example, round 2, if you roll a 5 or higher, you'll get a 6 and your reinforcements will show up all the way down to turn number 6, or if you just roll a 1, the entire reinforcements show up as well. To make matters worse, the attacker gets his entire gang is to use that gang against you while they try to secure the Hoard on this part. So as you can see here, as you can see in this photo, we have the Iron Sights are deployed on the near side of the board, while right directly in the center you have the Sleeping Dogs deployed for Sergeant Sigmary. So now that we talked about the scenario rules, we're going to talk about individual deployment zones on this one. Alright, that takes us directly to the deployment phase for the Sleeping Dogs. As you can see, the entire gang is located right in the middle of the table, right in the middle of that walkway of the causeway there. On the very top level, you got Tiny the Heavy, who's armed with a rocket launcher, as well as Mr. Sinister, who's armed with hot shot power packs for his last guns, as well as his last pistols. And then right across on the right-hand side, at the top of that derrick there, you got Painless Joe, who's armed with his heavy stubber. Right beneath them, you have Miss Spectre, that's the Sleeping Dog, who's armed with a last gun, who's also got rapid fire. She's kind of taking positions in a lower level. And on the ground level, you got Mr. Sands, who's their Scummer, who's armed with twin last pistols and hot shot power packs. He's also got the gunfighter as well as rapid fire skills, so that guy is extremely deadly up in close range. So that pretty much makes the deployment for the gang on this one. And here's a close of the top 3 defenders at the top. You got Tiny there on the left-hand side, followed by Mr. Sinister in the middle. That pile of rubber on the rubble that's on top of the walkway there, that's supposed to represent the Hoard that's being as the objective that the Iron Sights are going over and trying to capture at the same time. As you see there on the right-hand side there, you also got Painless Joe, who's also armed with this heavy stubber. And here's a close-up of the deployment along the center portions of the walkway. You got Miss Spectre, who's located on that top walkway there, and on the very bottom you have Mr. Sands kind of watching the ground as well. So that pretty much makes up deployment for the Sleeping Dogs. With that being said, we go on to deployment for the Iron Sights. And here's deployment for the iron sights. You can see they're deployed along the entire near side of the table. On the left hand side that you have Starbuck as well as the Knight Rider. That's his heavy stubber character over there. Right at the entrance there, that walkway, you have the basic little assault team. You have No Face as well as Bubba Zanetti, followed by Mudguts, I believe is the guy's name. That's the guy's armed with a shotgun as well. And over there on the right hand side, of course, you got the rest of it. You got Kundalini as well as Giant the Boy and Clunk. Those are the three close combat guys taking a point there next to that rubble pile. And of course, you got the last two members of the gang. I believe that's Diabando as well as the Toe Cutter, located there at Alexander's department store. West Separate, right there on the right hand side of the table as well. And that pretty much makes deployment for the iron sights. Here's a close-up of Starbuck as well as the Knight Rider taking up positions in that abandoned office building. And here's a shot of Bubba Zanetti as well as No Face and Mudguts taking up positions along that walkway, so that way they can assault directly towards the Horde. Then you got the three cannon fodder members of the gang whose only purpose is to really get shot at. That's Giant the Boy on the left hand side, followed by Clunk who's located in the center. And the right hand side there, that's Kundalini. That's the guy's armed with the last pistol as well as a battle axe. And finally, you got the last two members of the gang. You got the Toe Cutter then on the left-hand side with his 1 in a million bolt gun, and the right-hand side there you got Diabondo's armed with his last rifle. They're on either ends of that, so the West Superettes. That way they can defend, provide overwatch for the rest of their gang. So with that being said, we go directly to the top of turn number 1 for the iron sights because my buddy Fresh Prince Belair won initiative on this one, and we now start on with the battle report. Alright, that takes us to turn 1 for the iron sights. Is directly after the movement phase. As you can see in this photo, pretty much the entire gang just kind of assaults forward as quickly as possible. The very first thing that my buddy Fresh Prince de Bel Air does, he puts the Toe Cutter as well as Diabando on Overwatch, so that's why we have the little targeting matrix looking die indicators right next to those two guys, so that way they can shoot into Sergeant Submarine's opponent's phase whenever they do movement phase for that part. Also, on the left hand side of the office building, the Knight Rider as well as Starbuck, they also climb up to the second as well as third floor respectively of the office building, so that way they can start taking overwatch positions, so they can start shooting under that main gantry. At the same time, the three cannon fodder guys, which are Johnny the Boy as well as Clunk as well as Kundalini, kind of run towards that rubble pile to act as like human targets to be shot at, so that way they can kind of like take the suppression away from the rest of the maneuver element of the gang. And then finally on that walkway there you have the two heavies armored flamers, that's No Face as well as Bubba Zanetti, and you also got Mudguts taking up positions to start assaulting on that walkway there. So that pretty much makes the move phase on this one. Here's a close-up of Diabando with his Overwatch icon to represent the fact that he's going to be able to pop a shot here in Sergeant Submarine's turn. And here's a close-up of the Toe Cutter also on Overwatch with his 1 in a million bolt gun, so ready to put down some suppressive fire whenever that moment might arise. And here's a close-up of Johnny the Boy as well as Clunk and Kundalini taking up cover positions right behind that roll pile. Their job is to kind of like draw the fire of the sleeping dogs, so the rest of the maneuver elements can get into position and start opening up onto the sleeping dogs. And finally, here's a close-up of the some more element of, as you can see on the left-hand side, you have Starbuck who's taking his positions, uses his entire movement phase to run up into the second floor of that office building, so he's located there. He won't be able to shoot next turn. However, in the next turn, the Knight Rider, which is that heavy arm with a stubber on the second floor there, the floor right beneath the sniper's nest, he'll be able to open up with his stub gun onto that central walkway since he's got his heavy stubber located there as well. And if you also notice on that central walkway taking point, you have the two flamers, guys carrying flamers. That's the Knight Rider as well as No Face, and right behind them is Mudguts lending support with the shotgun. So with movement out of the way, we go directly to the shooting phase. And immediately the first blood goes directly to the iron sights as the Knight Rider takes aim with his heavy stubber, cuts loose with 4 different shots, manages to put down Tiny, so that guy's now laying on the ground as well inflict a flesh wound on him. So if Tiny doesn't manage to recover during his recovery phase and Sergeant Submarine's recovery phase, he'll have -1 to his ballistic skill as well as to his weapon skill. At the same time, he does hit and wound Mr. Sinister, but he recovers the flesh wound as well, so he's also dropped 1 for his ballistic skill as well as his weapon skill for the remainder of the battle as well. So that pretty much makes the shooting phase. Since there's nobody in close combat and there's no recovery to speak of, we go directly to turn 1 for the sleeping dogs. So here's a shot of turn number 1 for the sleeping dogs directly after the movement phase. As you can see, not much really happens so much on the top of the gantry. Pretty much the defenders stay where they're located at. The only real movement takes place at the base of that walkway there that's located in the center of the board. As you can see, Mr. Sands starts taking some positions there along the right next to that office building, so that way he can start laying down some suppressive fire onto the assaulting iron sights that kind of cross the middle of the board heading towards the Horde. And so that pretty much makes the movement phase for this part. And also, if you also notice, Miss Spectre, who's the Delaque, who's armed with the last gun on the first floor of that walkway. She also kind of moves a couple inches up forward as well, so that way she can start laying down some suppressive fire as well. Okay, here's a close-up of Miss Spectre. She's moving up a couple inches, so that way she can start shooting and engaging targets with her last gun. And here's a close-up of Mr. Sinister, Painless Joe, as well as Tiny, still located on the top of the gantry, watching over the Horde as well. Not much movement taking place on that side of the board. And here's a close-up of Mr. Sands, also moving away from that gantry area towards the office building, so that way you can start taking cover positions and start engaging the iron sights at leisure. So that being said, we go directly to the shooting phase. And just as Mr. Sinister is about to open up with his last rifle, my buddy Fresh Prince Bel-Air uses his Overwatch ability for the toe cutter, has him cut loose with his 1,000,000 bolt gun. He does manage to hit Mr. Sinister, but he does not have able to win the guy, so because of that, he's just pinned for the time being. And so because of that, Mr. Sinister loses his ability to shoot for the rest of the turn, unfortunately, because he got pinned down by the toe cutter. However, between Miss Spectre as well as Painless Joe, they managed to put the hurt on the 3 members of the Orlocks that kind of moved towards that rubble pile. They take down both Johnny the Boy as well as Clunk, and they also managed to put down Kundalini down as well. So all 3 of those guys are now down for the count right now. As you can see next to those little red dice, the blank shot is showing. That's kind of like our little token represent the fact that these guys are down and they're bleeding for right now. So things are not looking good for the iron sights. In fact, starting from turn number 1, they all have to start rolling off on bottle roll tests to see if they actually flee away. And during the recovery phase, Tiny still rolled down for the injury table, so because that he's still laying where he is, bleeding to death slowly, and Mr. Sinister recovers after his turn is up because he's done being pinned. So without any other recovery phase needed, we go directly to the top of turn number 2 for the iron sights. And that takes us directly to the top of turn number 2 for the iron sights. This is after the movement phase. As you can see in this photo, a couple of bit of movement takes place. As you can see on the right hand side, you have Diabando. He kind of goes full-blown sprint and starts running to those office buildings over there on the right hand side in order to outflank the sleeping dogs that they start engaging with some long range fire from his last rifle. At the same time, the toe cutter goes back on Overwatch again, so that way he can shoot it in during Sergeant Sigmarin's next turn anytime he wants to, using the Overwatch special rules. As you see there on the walkway as well, we got No Face as well as Bubba Zanetti, followed by Mudguts with a shotgun. They're kind of making their way to the edge of the walkway there. That way in the next turn they can start engaging the sleeping dogs on either on both the bottom level as well as the top level of that central gantry there as well. And meanwhile in the office building, the Knight Rider as well as Starbuck just kind of maintain their positions because they got a pretty good location to start doing some shooting. So that pretty much makes up the move phase for turn number 2 for the iron sights. Here's a close-up of the toe cutter maintaining his position next to the left-hand side of the West Superette, going on Overwatch, that way he can lay down some suppressive fire whenever the moment needs. Meanwhile, on the right-hand side, you got Diabando. He's heading towards that ruined office building there, so that way he can start putting on some suppressive fire there on the right-hand flank. Meanwhile, you got Johnny the Boy as well as Clunk and Kundalini. They're just still kind of laying there right behind that roll pile, just bleeding to death because they're still down for this turn. And here's a close-up of the assault team. At the left-hand side there, you got Bubba Zanetti as well as No Face. Right behind them is Mudguts. They're getting ready to assault on the gantryway for their next turn, so that way they can start laying down some fire with those 2 flamers. And here's our final close-up. You can see Starbuck as well as the Knight Rider still maintaining their positions, so that way they can start shooting with their heavy stubber as well as sniper rifles. So moving over, we go directly to the shooting phase. And since pretty much everybody ran in order to get to the located, the only shot that really lands off any well is Starbuck. He managed to hit as well as put down Miss Spectre on the lower level there with a sniper rifle in order to do that. So he kind of dropped her to the ground. Did a pretty good job making sure she's not doing anything else. The Knight Rider tried to cut loose with his stubber, but unfortunately for him, he just kind of flowed his roll. So Prince Bel-Air rolled like a bunch of 1s and 2s on that part. So none of his shots actually hit or wounded for that matter. However, in order to make that wound, he hit my buddy Fresh Prince Bel-Air, rolled a 6 to hit, so because of that, Starbuck has to take an ammo roll, and unfortunately for him, he rolled like a 1, so because of that, Starbuck's sniper rifle is now out of commission. That's why we have the little misfire die right next to him to represent the fact that his ammo roll has failed. So now Starbuck's got to rely on his twin bolt pistols to do any shooting at this point, so he's got to start dropping down from that office building and start engaging targets as well. And since there's no more shooting going on, and since there's no close combat, go directly to the recovery phase. And for these 3 characters, Johnny the Boy, he rolled a flush wound, so now he's back up on his feet, but now he's -1 to his weapon skill as well as to his ballistic skill. Diabando, he is still, not Diabando, Kundalini, he's still down for the count, so he's still laying there behind the road pile. However, when it comes to Clunk, he rolled a 6 on that part, so that guy will now go out of action, and he will need to roll on the severe injury tables to see exactly what happens to him at the end of this battle. So with recovery phase over, we go directly to the top of turn number 2 for the sleeping dogs. Alright, and that takes directly to the top of turn number 2 for the Sleeping Dogs. And unfortunately for my buddy Sergeant Sigmarine, when he rolled his d6 to see if any reinforcements showed up, he rolled a 1 on that part. So because of that, Sergeant Sigmarine's crew that's originally there protecting the Horde is just on their own for right now. So this photo is taken directly after the moon phase. As you can see on the bottom of the page, you got Mr. Sands. He starts moving to the other side of that office building, so that way he can start engaging some targets with some shots with his last pistols. At the same time, you can see both Painless Joe as well as Mr. Sinister making their way towards the end of the gantry, so that way they can defend against the assault team that's moving up onto the second level. And that's pretty much all the move that takes place right now, because most of the gang is pretty much down, and most of the gang hasn't even arrived on the table yet because they haven't rolled well for reinforcements. So that pretty much makes the move phase for this part. And it's at this time that my buddy Fresh Prince Bel-Air decides to use his Overwatch ability, snaps a fire off with his 1 in a million bolt gun for the toe cutter. He takes direct aim at Mr. Sands, manages to inflict a wound on that poor guy, and also put a flesh wound on him as well. So here's another shot of Mr. Sands. He's got -1 to his ballistic skill as well as to his weapon skill, because he's been injured on that case as well. So things are not looking so well for the Sleeping Dogs at this point. And here's a close of Mr. Sinister as well as Painless Joe making their way towards the to their unconscious friend Tiny, so that way they can start laying down some suppressive fire against the Sleeping Dog, against the iron sights that are coming their way. So the movement phase over, we go directly to the shooting phase. And the shooting phase is pretty much lackluster. My buddy Sergeant Sigmarine kind of flubbed his rolls for all of his shots. However, he did manage to hit what's his name, Starbuck, on the second level there. Unfortunate for him, though, he wasn't able to wound him, so Mr. Sinister just kind of pinned the guy. So right now he's laying face up to represent the fact that he's pinned. So the next turn, because he has nobody left within 2 inches of him, Starbuck will not be able to take place or do anything in the next turn because he's pinned for right now. He's got to wait till the end of his turn to escape pinning on that part. And Painless Joe also cuts loose with his heavy stubber, but unfortunate for him, he rolled Snake Eyes for his shooting, so because of that, he's only opening up with 2 shots. Manages to get another flesh wound onto Johnny the Boy as well. Drops down his ballistic skill and weapon skill down to 1 now. So if that guy takes another flesh wound, he too will go out of action as well. For the recovery phase, not really much happened in the recovery phase because there is no combat phase. Miss Spectre still down, same thing with Tiny, so pretty much that kind of sums up turn 2 for the Sleeping Dogs. With that being said, we go directly to top of turn number 3 for the Iron Sights. Alright, so here's a shot of the iron sights on the top of turn number 3 after the move phase. As you can see, there's actually quite a bit of movement going on for the iron sights, primarily on the right hand side. Diabano cuts to the left and starts going to the middle of the ruins of that office building. And unfortunately for his buddy, his opponent, Sergeant Sigmarine, he put Mr. Sands right where that window is located at, where the base of that office building is. So Diabano's probably going to pop a shot off with his last rifle as well. On the bottom of the screen there, as you can see, the toe cutter once again goes on Overwatch. That way he can start putting down suppressive fire with his bolt gun when the moment it arises. At the same time, you can see that Johnny the Boy kind of sprints over to the base of that gantry area to get out of the field of fire from both Painless Joe as well as Mr. Sinister. So you can't really see on the screen, but on the left-hand side, the Knight Rider climbs to the third floor of the office building in order to give some support to Starbuck, because he got shot the last turn. And at the same time, Mudguts as well as No Face as well as Bubba Zanetti also move up 4 inches onto the gantry, so that puts them in perfect position to start shooting up the place with their flamers. And that pretty much makes up the move phase on this one. Here's another close-up of the toe cutter put on Overwatch, so that way he can start shooting the next phase for Sergeant Sigmarine's turn. And here's another close-up of Diabano cutting left, so that way he can start shooting through that window and hit Mr. Sands with his last gun. Here's a shot of Johnny the Boy kind of ducking down behind the base of that walkway, so that way he doesn't get shot at anymore by the rest of the Sleeping Dogs. And this is a real close-up of the assault team. As you can see there, we have both flamers taking point, as well as a shotgun carrier on the back there, so that way they're in perfect range to lay down both shots of flamers onto all 3 targets. They'll be able to hit both Mr. Sinister as well as Tiny, and they'll also be able to hit the heavy Painless Joe with the heavy stubber as well. So this is kind of like a big risk, because if my buddy Prince Bel-Air doesn't manage to get off the wounds he needs to onto these guys, the heavy for Sergeant Sigmarine Sleeping Dogs, Painless Joe could actually cut loose with his stub gun and take all 3 of these guys out if he's not really careful. So that makes it the move on this side. And here's another close-up of the Knight Rider climbing up to the 3rd floor, letting some support for Starbuck as well. And since movement is over, we go directly to the shooting phase. In this shooting phase, Diabano cuts loose with his last gun and manages to put the last wound onto Mr. Sands, so he is now down and out for the count right now. So you can see that by a little red die, he is now down for this turn. So things are not looking really good for the Sleeping Dogs at this point. And to make matters worse, that assault team opened up with both of their flamers. Not only did they manage to put another flesh wound onto Mr. Sinister, but they also put him down as well. They also managed to put down Tiny as well, so he's now just laying there, just unconscious and kind of like on fire as well. And at the same time, they also managed to put down which is named Painless Joe as well. Managed to put him on the ground as well for that part as well. So all three of those guys are now down and just kind of waiting right there and bleeding to death at this point. And so since there's no real recovery, because when they rolled for Kundalini, he still rolled for being down, we go directly to the bottom of turn number 3 for the Sleeping Dogs. So that takes us to the bottom of turn number 3 for the Sleeping Dogs, and since pretty much everybody in this gang was down right now, not much really happened. There was no real movement. There was also no shooting or combat phase. So because of that, we go directly to the recovery phase. And as you can see in this photo, unfortunately for my buddy Sergeant Sigmarine, both Tiny as well as Painless Joe both go out of action, because that's what that little skull icon next to it. When they both rolled for their recovery phase, all they got was 6s on those parts. So because those two guys kind of popped up on the out of action, so they will both need to roll on the serious injuries table to see exactly what happens to them after the battle report. Mr. Sinister as well as Miss Spectre both got to get up with flesh wounds as well, so they're doing pretty good there as well. Oh, and I also forgot to mention, at the beginning of the turn, when they went to roll the dice to see if any reinforcements showed up, Sergeant Sigmarine rolled a 1 again, so because of that, no reinforcements showed up, and things are not looking all that great for the gang. And to make matters even worse, as you can see in this photo, Mr. Sands also rolls up for out of action as well. So because of that, he will also have to roll on the serious injury table for him as well. So that things are kind of like not looking good at all for the Sleeping Dogs. And with those 3 Sleeping Dogs out of action, we go directly to the bottom of the game, because what happens is that my buddy Sergeant Sigmarine just kind of balls out voluntarily. He's been having rotten luck with all of his dice rolls. So you can see in this photo, the Sleeping Dogs, they bottle out, and the Iron Sights are victorious on this one once again. So with that being said, that's pretty much going to wrap it for this battle report. We're going to go directly to the post game, because this battle report is now officially over. Alright, so now it's time for the Tales from the Underhive number 424 post-game. This is for the Hoard Scenario, and this is basically taking a looking at the different gang rosters that have been updated after the fact. So, this is the roster for now for the Iron Sights. For the injuries, the only guy who basically had an injury was Clunk, and he rolled a full recovery on that part, so he's doing perfectly fine as well. When it came to experience points as well as advancements, the Toe Cutter got +1 to his ballistic skill, Bubba Zanetti earned +1 to his wounds, the Night Rider earned +1 to his initiative as well. Mudguts actually leveled up twice. He got +1 to his ballistic skill as well as learned the specialist skill, so that's pretty awesome. Starbuck got +1 to his weapon skill, and Diamando got +1 to his initiative as well. For the territory income, the gang earned 65 credits in profit from their territories. They also managed to recruit 2 new Jews from the settlements that they both got. They both rolled 6s for that, so they got 2 more Jews added to the gang as well. They also got 10 extra credits because when Mr. Sands rolled up on his injuries to see exactly what happened to him, he ended up getting captured. The Sleeping Dogs decided he wasn't worth saving since he was only a scummer anyways, and he only cost 10 credits per round, so they sold him as a slave, and they got 10 credits for him as well. They end up giving a Mudgut shotgun to Clunk, so that way now guy's now packing a shotgun instead of just carrying a pistol and a sword. They also purchased a plasma gun and a bolt gun from Mudgut, since now he's got the specialist skills, so now he's really deadly. They also recruited 2 new Jews. They got Toady, he's a Jew from settlement number 1. They end up giving him Mr. Sands' last pistol as well as his hotshot power back, and also bottom them all. And the reason why that was the case is because when they sold Mr. Sands the scummer to slavery, they also got to keep all of his equipment as well. And also for their next recruit, Wes, he's also a Jew from settlement number 2. They bought him a bolt pistol and gave him Mudgut's crack grenades, so now that character is also carrying that weapon as well. The new gang rating now is at 2,470 points, and their current record is at 4 wins and 3 losses. And now let's talk about the Sleeping Dogs. For the injuries, Painless Joe got the shell shock injury, so he's got -1 to his leadership, while Tiny earned their impressive scars injury, so he gets +1 to his leadership. And Mr. Sands, when he rolled up for his injuries, he rolled up being captured, so they decided not to say it would go and rescue him, so now that guy's completely off the roster as well. For the advancements, Mr. Sinister got +1 to his toughness, Painless Joe got +1 to his attack, Tiny as well as Wesley got +1 to their ballistic skills, Noob, he was promoted to a ganger, got +1 to his initiative, and Ghost was also promoted to a ganger, and now he's got +1 to his attack as well. When they worked their territories, they generated a profit of 85 credits. They then purchased 3 sets of frag grenades for Noob, Reckless, as well as Ghost, and they took the last 10 credits and decided to save that up as well. Their new gang ring is now at 2,256 points, and the Sleeping Dogs' record is now 3 wins as well as 1 loss. So that's pretty much going to round it for this one, ladies and gentlemen. As always, tune in every Thursday where we alternate between Warhammer the Golden Age, as well as our Necromunda battle reports, Tales from the Underhive, as well as Sundays where we alternate between the 9th Age, as well as Age of Sigmar battle reports. Those are 9th Saga and Age of the Realms respectively. As always, you guys, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe. Your guys' input is always invaluable and it's always appreciated. And if all is wise, check out your guys' Instagram page as well as Google Plus to see what our latest and greatest is going on for our hobby. That's going to wrap it up for this one, you guys. We will see you guys in the next one. You guys stay classy. Commander CheapSkate out.